modules, and unless you are certified, you may not be able to continue as a director in times to come. The people were very, very critical on this particular issue. But I have now realized, and I have actually been leading some of these modules which are run for training sessions. Very, very senior people who have participated at the conclusion of those sessions have come up and said, yes, now we recognize why the corporate governance is that important. We didn't recognize or understand, yes, there are some legal obligations on the board or directors, but the details, underlying details which are there in terms of the board obligations and responsibilities are far more onerous than one actually thought. The Code of Corporate Governance didn't change anything. It brought in almost the same thing in the codified form, which was more or less there in the law, but made it assertive. People to recognize that this is their obligation, this is their responsibility, and this is what they, at the end of the day, are supposed to confirm that they have followed a compliance situation. So there is a great responsibility, which is an opportunity which has arisen, that for the board members we can come up and try to address the situation, that how they can discharge their obligation and responsibility. The risk infrastructure and the risk monitoring and the metrics which exist, or enterprise risk management situation, that is something which has become the foremost, the most important component for the purposes of the directors to understand, follow, and practice. This is something which has been a problem. Multinationals have been following it. Some of them have been following it in letter and spirit. Most of them have done it very well. But in a number of other companies, we do have good disclosures, we do have audit committees, we do have board compliance statements, but still the depth which is required for that was lacking. And that depth has to come forward from the situation that you'll have to understand that if audit committee and the board has to give some confirmations about the compliance, how would they be able to achieve that satisfaction and assurance for themselves before they can give that confirmation to the shareholders at large? And that is something which is vital and important, and I consider that this crisis has given us an opportunity for the board members to mobilize them and make them understand the importance of the risk management scenario.
Thank you very much. You are making, as one of the authors of this Code of Corporate Governance, you're making a very good point, and I'd ask my colleagues to comment on it. But let me give a comment that it is now, as you say, and I'm not sure whether it's generally known, become mandatory that for directors not only to have orientation, but as of September, the listing rules of the Karachi stock, or all the stock exchanges have been changed, that at least one director on every board of every public company must have gone through this course of the Pakistan Institute of Corporate Governance, and by June 2011, all board members should have been certified, or certificated is the word, I think, for this. But that's one thing. But don't forget, this only applies to the 700-ish public listed companies. What about those companies? How are we going to do something who are the majority by far, 40,000 or thereabouts? But really the topic let us focus on now, and I would invite my colleagues to say something on that, is how, assuming the audit committees are there and everything is there, how do we mobilize, what do we do, what can the boards do to get going, get the economy going in today's, shall we say, turmoil or uncertain circumstances where it is difficult to forecast the future? I think one can agree that it is difficult to forecast the future, and not only for economic reasons, but for so many other reasons with which we are all familiar. Would you care to comment, Dr. Saab, as a starting point?
Forecasting is often the most difficult responsibility of a CEO, to able to forecasting also draws heavily upon the past data, and my favorite example to usually is looking at the past data is like driving your car on the freeway, looking at the rear view mirror, which effectively tells you what is happening right behind you, which may very well be the indicator of things happening ahead of you, but there are surprises. There are surprises in terms of new economic informations. There are surprises in terms of political, dimension, technical dimensions, cultural, terrorism, a variety of other dimensions coming in. However, we also need to realize that there is a life beyond minimum cost producer as well. Again, there are plenty of opportunities for niche markets. There are plenty of opportunities for integration. We have talked about, let's say today we talked about the brands, Pakistani brands, why are they not global? But the question to ask is, are we ready for global brands? Why not team up with a global player and do because the competition in the world now onwards is going to be between supply chains. How you're able to take it from the source over to the end customer. It doesn't matter who is doing what part, but what matters is that whatever part that you're doing it in the most efficient fashion, and you're adding value to to that. We have to look at our businesses very, very differently and see how can we improve the value proposition, productivity that we talked about earlier in the day as well. How can we do that? And if we look at our business models more carefully, and that's what the responsibility of the board is, to be looking at not only reactive way, but to be proactive, to be looking at the challenges facing in 5, 10, 15, 20, 100 years time, and be ready for that. Sure, 100 years time, who knows what the world is going to be like in 100 year time, but our directions need to be chalked out. We need to be gearing in a rough direction over there. To me, our boards are not doing that job. Our boards are not looking, they're only firefighting, they're only, rising to what I call as, actually Peter Drucker calls that as rising to the levels of incompetence. Meaning they continue to operate in the mode of a controller, they continue to operate in the mode of a middle manager, as opposed to be the mode of a directors who are supposed to be looking at the forward visibility of the organizations, as opposed to be just looking at the past only. So the challenges for us is for the boards is to again, think out of the box and look at opportunities beyond the low-cost production opportunities. Look at the challenges of the market, what the consumers are asking for, and be ready for that.
This is all played out in the head, a recession. People, for whatever reason, wake up one day and decide things are going wrong. That's what happens. I can guarantee you one thing, 99 out of 100 companies at this time are looking at a recession and saying, let's pull back.
They want to pull back?
Yeah, they would. It's a very natural human reaction. You will play safe. So the best thing is to be that one company out of 100 which says there is an opportunity out there now, let's grab it. In this environment, just one figure, we've grown 76% this year in volume, 76%.
Wow, in this year?
This year. There was an opportunity. You can worry about it and say, if I put out so much capital expenditure, if I go and buy machinery, the volume might not come this year or next year. Or you can say, well, let me grab that opportunity and let's see if it happens. If it doesn't happen, fine, I'll lose some financial charges for a couple of years. And that's what we did. We were geared up for that growth. It happened, and we were able to grab market share. So I think that is the first lesson for me, at least in a recession. You need to think very optimistically, because guaranteed almost everyone is going to think negatively. So that's the first thing. As far as the longer term vision is concerned, I don't think you should let recessions, etc., play it out. Someone mentioned earlier about climate change. Those are the sort of things you should be looking at. You should be looking at what's happening in 20 years' time, 25 years' time, 30 years' time, and I think that's how you need to be planning